Welcome to my performance guide for Hell Let Loose. We're going to go through some settings you can change in your BIOS, Windows, Nvidia control panel and in game to try and get you the best looking game you can with a good and stable frame rate. If you like this video, then give it a like, subscribe for more and consider becoming a member. So first up, let's mention your CPU. Hell Let Loose needs a good CPU to get the most out of it. If you have an outdated CPU, then consider getting an upgrade. If you're looking at getting a new graphics card such as the RTX 3000 series, if your CPU is outdated, you will not get the most out of that fancy new card, so consider getting a new CPU first. I wonder if your memory is running at its advertised speed. Have you even checked? Is your memory put into the correct slot so it's running in dual or quad channel? Download CPU-Z to check. Open up the program and click on the memory tab. If you have two pieces of memory, it should be showing dual in the channel section or quad if you have four pieces of memory. If it's not, then your memory may be in the incorrect slots. Check your motherboard manual for the correct slots. Now let's check out your DRAM frequency. This will be your memory speed. You can see mine is currently 1064.5. Now since my channel is dual, I double this to get my current memory speed, which is roughly 2129 or 2133 MHz. But my memory should be running at 3200 MHz. To fix this, you need to go into your BIOS, so reboot your PC and get into your BIOS. Now look for your memory settings or a section called XMP. Here you need to select the correct profile to match your memory speed. You may need to download and update a BIOS for your motherboard first, but I would highly recommend doing this anyway. So select the profile, save and exit, go back into Windows, go back into CPU-Z, and you can now see that my memory is at the correct speed. This will help to get the best performance we can, and this is even more important for AMD Ryzen CPUs as it needs good memory speeds. Now onto your drivers, and just make sure you've got the most recent drivers for your video card. Just do it, it's gonna help you out, so just do it. Check your Windows power plan settings. So to do this, hit the start bar icon on the bottom left or wherever you have your start bar and type in power and go into your power plan settings. If you have an AMD Ryzen CPU, you should see Ryzen based power plans, and so select the Ryzen high performance plan, or if you're on Intel, just choose high performance. Next, we're going to disable Windows Update Delivery Optimisation. So Windows Update has a setting that can use your bandwidth to send updates to other PCs across the internet. This can really eat up your bandwidth. So to disable this, go into your advanced options for Windows Update. So search for Windows Update settings, click Advanced Settings, Delivery Optimization, then click this little selection so it's off. Windows Debloater is a program that removes all the faff and rubbish from Windows that you do not need. A word of warning though, this isn't a Microsoft application, so if it breaks your system, this is on you. I haven't used this on my main PC, but I have used it on my laptop that I used to help make my weapon guides, and that laptop is working fine. If you do use this, it removes all of this from your system, and I believe that older or slower systems will benefit most from this. I will put a link in the description of where to get this script. AMD graphics card users, feel free to skip this part onto the next one. So to get into your Nvidia control panel, right click on your desktop and select Nvidia control panel. Now, once it's loaded, select Manage 3D Settings. We want to select Power Management Mode as Prefer Maximum Performance, Preferred Refresh Rate as highest available, and Texture Filtering Quality as Performance. So apply these settings. Now click on Change Resolution and ensure that you're using your monitor's native resolution and the highest refresh rate your monitor supports. If you have a G-Sync or G-Sync compatible monitor, then head over to set up G-Sync and enable this for Windows and full screen. Firstly, go into gameplay and set your dead body's despawn delay down to its lowest. This will give you a nice little bit of FPS increase. So now video settings. So firstly, whenever you load up the game, go into your video options and hit apply. There's a bug where your settings are not fully applied when you load the game up. So now for pure best performance, you just need to set everything to its lowest setting. But if you do this, your game is going to look like this. So we're going to go through the settings and compare the options so we can give you the best looking game with the best performance. Full screen mode. The best setting for your FPS is full screen, but if you like to alt tab a lot, I'd recommend windowed full screen, and that's the setting I actually use. Full screen resolution. This should match your desktop resolution. For resolution scale, when this is set at 100%, what this means is that the game is rendering at whatever your full screen resolution is. If you lower it, it lowers the rendering resolution. If you increase it, it renders at a higher resolution. I would recommend leaving this at 100% unless your resolution is 4K, and if it is 4K, I would recommend lowering it a bit if you're having severe FPS issues. Or you could just potentially change the full screen resolution. For vertical sync, this setting syncs the frame rate of the game to your monitor's refresh rate. It eliminates screen tearing, making the game look better, but it also increases input delay. I would have this switched off, and I do as I am using G-Sync, which is set up in the Nvidia control panel, and this syncs your refresh rate to your frame rate so they always match. Brightness, this doesn't change your frame rate, just a personal preference here. So now let's check out the rest of the in-game settings. We are going to look at how each setting changes the graphics and its frame rate impact. I can tell you there's going to be some strange results here, but the game isn't fully optimized at the moment. This section is being recorded at 1440p with all settings at their lowest or turned off apart from the setting we are changing. So bumping the texture quality from low to medium doesn't seem to have really an effect in game. I can't see any improvements, and there's not much change to the frame rate. At high, we can see some texture improvements on the sleeves, on the walls, and textures further away are improved as well. Now onto Epic, I'm not seeing any texture improvement close up, but further away you can see there's some extra texture detail. So now onto Shadows, so we've set our texture quality back down to its lowest, and Shadows Medium is actually the lowest Shadows setting we've got in the game. Now setting shadows to high is increase the range at which shadows actually appear. You can see in the train car on the right, and in front of us the fences and the walls now have shadows, and the house right at the end has got a little bit extra detail in the shadows. And Epic, I can't see any new shadows in this setting, but I can see shadows further away have some extra detail to them. Now onto AA again, we've put shadows back down to its lowest setting along with textures. And you can see there's quite a bit of jagginess all around. Now as we go through the different AA methods and the different AA quality, we can see that the jaggies will improve as we go along, and the frame rate will be going down slightly as we go through the quality settings. What I would recommend really for AA is the method is personal preference. I play with Clarity TAA. It looks a bit more jaggy, but I think everything's a bit more sharper, and I just prefer that. But I would say go with what you prefer the most, because each of the AA quality settings, it doesn't seem to have that much of an impact, at least not for me. So I would say play with Epic quality if you can. Now onto FX. So now we've disabled AA, so we can see the frame rate impact from the FX settings, and this scenario probably isn't the best to test effects because there's nothing going on. There's no tanks driving through, no bullet impacts, no explosions, no bombing runs, no anything. But we can see that as we change the FX, it's still affecting frame rate, so expect these frame rate changes when you're actually in a battle to be quite bigger, I would say. So view distance and height is the lowest setting we've got here. You can see the house at the end of the street is really blurry. I don't know if that's a bug or not. or a setting change, but let's change it to epic and see what happens. So no change now on epic to the house at the end of the street, so I don't know if that's a bug or something else going on here, but what we can see is along the wall on our left, there's some extra foliage that's now been rendered in. And foliage up close has changed as well. Now onto foliage itself, and as we go through the settings we can see that more foliage is rendered in close to us and further away, but foliage itself changes as well, like some foliage in medium may not be there on epic. What I would have to say here is because of how much foliage gets rendered in epic, you've really got to play on medium just purely for gameplay, because you could be hiding behind a bush that you think's there on epic, but to pretty much everyone else who's playing on medium, it's not there. Now onto post-process. Now what I would like to see the devs do is actually separate post-processing out, because this setting will actually handle a number of different effects within the game, and you may want certain effects enabled but others not, so it'd be good if we get some extra detail in the settings of what we can actually change. What is odd is when we change to post-process high, you can see the foliage actually changed, and that's a bit of a strange setting. But in this scene you can't really see that much difference. What I can tell you is when you change to high in epic, you get extra like brightness and lighting from the sun, and you can see extra detail in fire and how the light interacts with fire and explosions as well. But for a gameplay perspective, I would probably say just run it at medium, because when you're looking towards the sun, it's bright and it's going to affect you spotting enemies. Now onto SSAO, and going through these settings, I'm not really seeing any extra impact to how the game looks at all. There's some extra foliage again for some reason. The only thing I can really see is the bush on our right by the wall get some sort of extra depth in terms of shadows, but I don't think it's worth it for the frame rate impact. This setting is one of the biggest frame rate impacting settings in the game, so I would recommend turning this off. Now onto motion blur, and of course you're not going to notice any change when you're standing still when we have motion blur turned on, but it is noteworthy that it does actually affect the frame rate slightly when we've turned it on and we're standing still and doing nothing. Now onto this mess of a table. You can see the frame rate range I was getting for each individual setting, and we can see the biggest impact on frame rate is shadow quality, view distance and SSAO. Now in my opinion, for the best looking game with good performance, I would choose these settings: texture quality high, shadow quality medium or default, and personally for AA method I use clarity TAA on epic, FX quality high, although you could go medium on this, view distance at high, foliage quality medium, post-processing quality high, SSAO definitely off, and motion blur off. I've also heard reports that changing audio quality to epic can give you higher frame rate, but during my tests it didn't change the frame rate at all. But now we're going to go on to the single biggest, easiest thing you can do to increase your frame rate, and just to note that this setting was enabled for me during all the recording I've done. And this setting is to enable DirectX 12. So to enable this, you have to go into Steam, right click on the game, go into properties, go into set launch options, and in the box you see you need to put -DX12, and that's it, nothing else. For players, some people have reported 20 to 50 extra frames, so doing that is well worth it. If you cannot use DirectX 12, like if you get a crash when you boot the game up, you need to ensure that your Windows is fully up to date, and you need to ensure that your graphics card supports DirectX 12. Also, if you use DirectX 12, I would run the game in windowed full screen, because there is one known crash with using DX12, and that is when you Alt-Tab when running in Fullscreen mode. So setting to windowed full screen eliminates this crash. There used to be a crash when loading up FOI with DX12, but now the recent update to the game has fixed that crash. So that's it for this video. I hope all these performance tips and changes and anything else we can do in the game really helps you out and gives you a much better performance and experience playing this awesome game. So again, if you like the video, give it a like and subscribe, and consider becoming a member, and thank you all for watching. Cheers.